Alright, hello everybody and welcome to my Mythic Cenarius guide. So the easiest way to kill Cenarius is in a 4-minute Zerg strategy. Now the idea of this strategy is to phase the boss into phase 2 before the third set of adds spawn. Now to do this, you want to be 3 tanking and 4 healing. So the idea of this is you have a third tank the dragons in the opposite side of the room to where Cenarius is, and you're never going to be killing the dragons during this fight. So you want to be sending a third tank and preferably a Holy Paladin or Mistweaver Monk over into the back corner of the room to ensure that no brambles spawn on that side of the room and that they can sit there for the rest of the fight with the dragons and completely mitigate an entire mechanic. Now, this whole strategy consists around your raid group having enough damage to get the boss down to 35% HP before the adds spawn. Now this requires a lot of damage going out, and also requires a lot of healing because you'll be attacking the boss during Thorns. Now the first mob that's going to spawn is the Nightmare Ancient. Now the Nightmare Ancient will do 2 stomps on Mythic. At this point in the fight, you need to be popping some kind of defensive cooldown and some kind of throughput cooldown. I recommend you use something like Barrier and something like Darkness. That's what we decided to use, because at this point in the fight, this is where your raid is going to be stacked. You want to make sure you're cleaving down this Nightmare Ancient as efficiently as possible, and you want to be making sure that this Nightmare Ancient dies before it does its second stomp. Shortly after the Nightmare Ancient dies, you'll be getting a set of wisps coming out. Now these wisps will do a 500k explosion to every single person in the raid per wisp. This is the most intensive healing part in the fight because there will be thorns up on the boss, there'll be 6 wisps explosions going off, so it is very important that you have as many healing cooldowns out at this point in the fight as possible. So this is where you need to figure out what healing cooldowns you have available, what healing cooldowns, at minimum you need to heal through the Nightmare Ancient to survive through this wisp phase. During the wisp phase, you'll also have a Twisted Sister spawn. Now this Twisted Sister you do not want to tank on top of the boss like the Nightmare Ancient. This is because of the scorn going out and the amount of damage going off from the wisps. Now you want to be putting classes like mages who are extremely susceptible to hitting themselves on thorns because of how bursty their damage is. You want to be making sure you're sitting them on top of the Twisted Sister so they're not hitting themselves while the wisps are going off. Now it is very important that during the Scorn touches that go off, your whole raid is spread out so nobody is getting extra stacks of the Scorn touches. After 2 Scorn touches have gone out, the thorn should fall off about 5 seconds after. After this second Scorn touch is when you want to be bringing both the boss and the Twisted Sister into the middle of the room and meeting them up. At this point, I recommend you do second pot, and you want to be killing the boss and getting him down into 35% so he phase changes before the next set of add spawn. This is the DPS check for the boss. Once you can hit this point in the fight, you've pretty much killed the boss. All you need to be doing for this last phase is managing the size of the pools you're putting on the ground. All this requires you to do is have an adequate set of tank cooldowns going out so you can minimize the stack of the pools. You can use something like Blessing of Protection to completely mitigate this mechanic. All you have to do for this is cast it during the cast, therefore the tank will not take any damage from the spear, and then the pool on the ground will be as small as possible. The only other mechanic on Mythic for this last phase will be the set of horrors that charge across the room. This is why it's very important to make sure the stacks are as small as possible, because then you'll have a lot of room to move around. As you're moving the boss around, you need to have the tank who is tanking the 2 dragons at this point mimic your movements. So as you move to the front right hand side of the room, you want to make sure the tank with the dragons moves from the back right hand side of the room to the back left hand side of the room. You want to make sure that you're always on the diagonal so your raid has as much room as possible to be spread out. This is an extremely healing and DPS intensive fight. Therefore, you need to be doing quite a few things to be min-maxing the amount of damage and healing you can be putting out. This comes down to a few attempts, a lot of consistency, and knowledge of what you need to be doing during this fight. Some tips I have for this fight are things like healers using DPS pots at the start of the fight to maximize the amount of damage they can put out. During the start of the fight, there is very little raid damage as the Nightmare Essence hasn't stacked up and the thorns will not be out yet. I highly suggest you set up a rotation for classes who can clear the brambles. You want to be making sure you can essentially clear every single patch of brambles that comes out. You want to make sure you're using classes like rogues to making sure they're clearing first, because they have the shortest cooldown, so then it'll be up just before you're about to transition. You also want to be making sure that you're having people reset at points that is convenient to them. So this means if you're having a rogue reset, make sure they're doing it while they don't have any cooldowns available, while they're maybe waiting for a cooldown to come up, so they're not losing damage on the boss. It is also important that you have the ranged only soaking the green pools that spawn in the ranged. This is so the melee can constantly be resetting and not have to run out to ranged. This fight is all about consistency. Make sure when you're doing it, you're popping your defensive cooldowns, your offensive cooldowns at a set point that makes sense to you. It is rather important, especially as a healer, that you're using your healing cooldowns when required and not just reactively when people tend to take damage. It is really important that you have big cooldowns up for when the wisps are exploding. You don't want to be using things like tranquility at points where there's just random damage, say from the creeping nightmare. Also make sure that when the wisps are exploding, that you have your Holy Paladin stand out in the middle of the raid, cast their Rule of Law, and make sure they get out as much healing as possible. At this point in the fight, if they're popping Wings and Devo Aura, they can actually put out a fairly significant amount of healing to the raid while keeping up their tank. At this point, there should only be one dragon, or there should only be the second dragon spawning, and they shouldn't have too many stacks of the Creeping Nightmare. It is also important that you have the tank and the healer that is tanking the dragons off in the corner. They need to make sure they're resetting their stacks as often as possible. You just want to be doing this during the breath. The breath really does not hit that hard, so don't worry about just running through it, sprinting and picking up and clearing your stacks. You do have a fair amount of time to reset the dragon's position before they do their breath again, so don't worry about your positioning too much after their breath. It's just really important that their breath isn't on top of the raid and they are stacked as far in the corner as possible, because you will find that the range need as much space as possible to be cutting the brambles. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed my guide to Mythic Cenarius. This is definitely the easiest way to do it. We managed to get this down after 2 nights of progression. It's really not too bad if you can make the DPS check and your healers are competent enough to be able to heal through the thorns damage. So yeah, hope you enjoyed and good luck. Xavius is just around the corner after you kill this boss. It is a fairly fun boss. It's very short, and you can reset it as soon as something goes wrong.
54, 44 mil.
Heals on CAD, heals on CAD.
Wall.
Get out of that wall.
Just tunnel the boss.
Top and shield wall. Hand it free to me. Nah.
Be gone.
Go.
Oh my goodness!
1 mil.
Yes!
Oh, wait. Oh.
Good man. Good fucking
Jesus, that was
God.
That's all that Serenity Madness. All that Serenity Madness, eh, Regan?
Oh, it's on personal loot, Carl.
Fucking rip.
You do this every time. By the way.
God, is it on personal?
Who gives a fuck if it's on personal? We literally fucking killed it.